Hey everybody, Greg Siskind here, joined this week by Julia Scharf, one of the Siskind Sussor lawyers. I think Julia's been here at least once or twice before.
No, brand new.
What's that?
Brand new. It's my first time
This
here.
is the first time? Oh,
My
well,
first time. Take it easy on me.
everybody welcome Julia. Julia is not new to Siskind Sussor, she's just new to live streaming.
Mhm.
Anyway, we have a lot to talk about, although Julia's made the agenda for tonight. I'm very happy that she has taken that task on. We will be talking about the litigation that we are, it still potentially could be filed today, but it's probably, I'm guessing, now in the morning just because of some developments that happened today. And we will talk about the week's news and we will answer your questions. So if you are watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on Facebook or you're watching us on LinkedIn or on X, all you need to do if you want to ask questions is post your question as if you were making a comment, and we see all those, and then we can we usually try and answer most of them. Sometimes we make calls not to answer a particular question if we think it looks a little too particular to a person's situation and is not going to be that useful for everybody else, or is not appropriate to answer in a public forum for one reason or another. But hopefully we will be able to answer some questions tonight. And again, I'm Greg Siskind of Siskind Sussor. I am one of the immigration lawyers at the firm, also a co-founder of VisaLaw.ai, and also a co-founder of Impact Litigation. And this is the rare week where I got to wear all three hats on the same project on there, and I'll be talking about that. Julia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm the newest edition of the lawyers at Siskind Sussor. I've been with the firm about a little less than 2 years now as a lawyer. Before that, I was a paralegal for about 2 years before I went back to school. I spent a lot of time on non-immigrant employment-based visas, and I'm excited to be here for my first live stream tonight.
All right, excellent. So I'm going to put the little banner up so people know what they're watching. We'll keep this here for a little while, and every once in a while I will turn it off so that they can see our names. For some reason, StreamYard doesn't let you see your names and a banner at the same time. That would be too much, or somebody has to give me StreamYard lessons and we can figure that out. So Julia, tell us what's in the news immigration wise. You said when we were talking beforehand, you were going to start with some good news for the first time in a long time, that we have something good to report. And I was like, all right, it's a little bit underwhelming as far as this news on there. So don't get excited, people, but we'll take what we can find.
Right. We take it where we can get it. So I thought it would be nice to start with, like you said, more positive, I guess, before we get to the heavy stuff. But so scheduling is a nightmare. I'm sure a lot of you out there agree. Scheduling a visa appointment abroad at a consulate is not as simple as it sounds. Not that it really sounds simple, but luckily the visa wait times page is back up. That came down. I can't remember how long ago now, a few weeks maybe. And I don't know, we didn't know if we'd ever see it again. So it's nice to see that that's back. For those of you that are scheduling non-immigrant visa interviews.
Has anybody done any analysis yet about how much worse waits got since we can now see them again?
Oh, no, I haven't personally. I did see that.
Our old friend James tells us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw the consular report come out today, actually, like a bit ago, and I didn't have a chance to read it yet, and I should have. But yeah, we should. Maybe we could phone a friend later if we have the time. But that's back up.
Yeah, it's the AI to tell us.
Yeah, AI.
AI, that's a good AI job to compare. Go back in time. You can go to the Wayback Machine and see the last report, and then feed that to the AI and give the new data that we just saw today and ask it how much worse things got at all these consulates. So
yeah, that would be
the good news is we can actually see this. We can see this report now. The bad, but that may be the only good news in this whole thing, is depending on how bad waits have gotten. And I would guess that they are getting bad and they're bad and getting worse. All right.
Probably. Don't
So
turn
that
your
was
phone
okay. Was there any other news?
Yeah, so there's also a tool now for those of you that are waiting to schedule immigrant visa interviews. If your case is now documentarily complete, there's a tool now that you can use and to determine when you might hear from the NVC to get that interview set up. So that's some nice transparency too. And then a district court ordered the Trump administration to restore funding for unaccompanied children, which is nice. I'm sure we'll see the administration fight back on that, but again, we take our good news where we can, and it was a glimmer of hope there. So that's nice.
Right,
And
so that was
then,
good. We'll have some good news probably also when we talk a little bit about the students in a bit, but the on there, just on
yeah,
there when we
so
take
you,
transparency. What was the news on registration?
registration. Oh, that's also a nice thing that popped up online. There's a tool. So let me back up a bit. Registration went into effect on April 11th. So online though, if you still have questions, because we've still been getting a lot of
Tell
questions from
people what
people that,
registration is again. They hopefully know it by now if it applies to them, but remind people what registration is.
so if you are not already, if you have not entered on a visa or issued an I-94 when you entered, or I mean, essentially what we're getting from this, the key is that it's fingerprinting. So if you've never been fingerprinted, you need to go online and register yourself for this new alien registration system the Trump administration has put out. It went into effect on April 11th. You register through your online My USCIS account. If you have children under the age of 14, they're supposed to be registered as well. You need to create an account in their name for them. And you fill out, I forget the actual numbers on the form, G35, something like that.
But they don't; those children don't actually get fingerprinted until they're 14, right?
Right. When they turn 14, the rule says that within 30 days of them turning 14, the parents or legal guardian of those children need to go back into the account, update the registration, at which point it should trigger an appointment, a biometrics appointment at an ASC center, for that fingerprinting to happen. But online, there is a new tool that you can use to walk. It asks you some questions and it'll walk you through them, and then it'll determine whether or not you need to register.
Okay.
So helpful.
All right. So that's helpful. I think from the folks that normally watch us, there's, probably the groups that are, I know a lot of people on non-immigrant visas watch, and whether they're students or they're on work visas and all that. And I think that the main concern is probably for that group, most of them actually, including their children, are probably already registered because they came in with an I-94 and they presumably had the fingerprinting. The main group, non-immigrants, if you're here on an F1 or an H1 or anything like that, just pay close attention to that 14-year that requirement for 14-year-olds. I think there's going to be a lot of non-compliance with that because people are just not going to be aware. They're going to assume that they're registered, everything's fine. They're not going to be aware that the child not getting fingerprinted after 14 is a violation. You don't want your kid to potentially also have some status violation later on, or some problem that could come up later on because they didn't do it. So just be aware of it and make sure that you're complying with those rules if you are in non-immigrant status or Canadian. And Canadians, most of them have to register if they're here more than 30 days. I believe that's the rule for them.
Yep.
They don't get regular I-94s. That's the reason for that. So just know this requirement is out there, and it is a trap, essentially to create problems for people that don't register. So you should be, there's other conversations people are having about, the wisdom of registering. I'm going to basically, I always advise clients, here's the law, and you're expected to follow it. On here, there's been litigation on the registration program that has so far been unsuccessful. So for now, it is the law, and you have to comply with it. Okay, so let's talk about the thing that has been basically tying up half our office for the last couple of days, or last week or so, is getting ready for a lawsuit that's well, it's an existing lawsuit that's already been filed. We are going to be amending that lawsuit, and some of you may be familiar with our good friend Chuck Cook. Chuck is one of our litigation partners in Impact Litigation, along with the folks at Joseph and Hall and Jesse Bless's practice in Boston, and we sue together on high impact issues. And we, we kind of like look for these where there are major constitutional issues, or where there's major due process issues, or it looks like there's some serious non-compliance with immigration law. And on the student visas, there has been obviously a ton of publicity about this with the SEVIS terminations. At the beginning, people may remember it started with just the people that were engaged in speech that wasn't acceptable to the administration, but it moved very quickly to anybody who was in any kind of law enforcement database, even if it was a completely non-serious violation of a law, or something that they were completely cleared of, or the charges were dropped, or they were found innocent on there.
Yeah.
All those people should not.
There were individuals who were victims of a crime that got wrapped up in that,
Yeah.
because they had fingerprints on them and they were just victims. It was terrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why people are in that database, and rather than actually investigating them one by one to find out who is potentially removable amongst the students, they just said, no, we're just going to take 60. I think the figure from the Politico article was like 6,800, and we're just going to instantly, terminate their SEVIS records, and we're going to. And the State Department was doing the same thing, and they were doing mass revocations of visas. So there were about 100 lawsuits that were filed around the country, mostly on an individual basis, for people. And as far as I know, I think all those suits have been successful.
Good.
But there has been but what we were looking at doing was potentially a class action that would basically, it would cover the plaintiffs in our case, but also hopefully, if we're successful at the end, cover everybody, and also hopefully get to a point where we might be able to get some discovery and find out what really happened. Some of that's been coming out bit by bit in some of the other cases, and some of the judges have been requiring documentation of different things that have happened, and so it's been very interesting. But we are what we're going to be doing in our case is Chuck has already won a temporary restraining order for about 130 people in his case in Atlanta that he filed initially with his firm. We're going to file hopefully an amendment of the case, probably we were trying to do it tonight, but we're still actually trying to onboard people that were waiting on documentation. If you're in the case, please send your documents to us so that you can be in the case. If you're not, we're not going to be able to add you in. We're not going to delay the case because we're waiting on people. But
emails. Check your spam folders in case we've sent you an email.
Spam folders, because we have several people that we haven't heard back from, and we just don't want to have to take them out of the case, which we're going to have to if we don't hear from them. But anyway, we'll have a couple hundred more people that are going to be added to the case, hopefully tomorrow. And it is going to be filed as a class action. We are going to be suing both the Department of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State. And I think we might be the first one suing on that. And we've been doing a lot of research. The conventional wisdom is it's hard to sue the Secretary of State. It is hard to sue the Secretary of State. They get a lot of leeway, but it is not unlimited leeway that they get. And they do have to follow the Constitution and provide due process, and they do have to, and some of the consular non-reviewability requirements. There's a process where non-reviewability is based on certain assumptions of how the process is working for visa revocation or visa issuance. Anyway, all will be revealed when we file our suit as far as the legal theories, and hopefully we're going to get the Secretary of State to modify what's been going on as well, and not just ICE, which has been in the last couple of days. So a lot of people saw that that ICE had uh, temporarily reversed course, and I'll say temporarily for a reason, which is that they started reinstating people. A lot of people haven't been reinstated yet. They have also issued a statement saying that if your visa was revoked, um, that they are not going to be reinstating your CVIS record. We know they did in fact uh, reinstate the CVIS record for some people that were revoked. So they're contradicting themselves there. And what we don't know is like, did that start at a certain point where they said, now we're going to do this? Then they issue this policy memo that they don't issue through normal channels. They just submitted it with Discovery, with and I think it was in the California case, maybe. I don't know. There's so many of these cases, but that memo laid out when they believe that they can terminate a CVIS record, and one of those says now explicitly that they will do it when there's been a visa revocation, even though that seems to contradict what the Foreign Affairs Manual says as far as when when a revocation can happen. There's a lot of argument. There's a lot of questions, like the sequence of things. Is it coordinating? Is ICE telling Secretary of State to people that are on their list? Are they all checking the database independently? A lot of unknowns about it, and also seeming contradictions. And there have been some leaked emails, not leaked. Well, there have been some leaks, but it was more of documents that were produced and redacted documents that were produced in these cases. And I think one was produced in the DC case yesterday, that it was an email between Homeland Security and Secretary of State, which very much looked like there was coordination that was happening as far as this whole sequence of the revocations and the CFIUS termination. So lots to find out still.
Yeah, if I'm thinking of what I think you're talking about, it seemed like too it was a pretty clear admission of just like a big sweep across the CVIS records, as opposed to trying to do any combing through individuals and seeing what was going on.
No individual due process here.
Right.
This was collective action.
Or even concern for it.
Yeah. So there's that's why judges are not happy with this on there. This is not how the American system is supposed to operate on here. So it's also kind of curious. It's like, who came up with this idea that this was the population that Americans brought this government in, and brought this administration in to fight. Most people think it's like, you said you were going to kick out the criminals. What does this have to do with that? That's what that's what people thought that they were voting for. And there were a lot of people that voted for Trump because they wanted control at the border and they wanted the criminals kicked out, but they generally like immigration and see the value of it, and didn't, and we're told that numerous times by Trump on the stump that he likes immigrants. He wants them to follow the law on here, and this is the first place you follow the law is in your own administration, as far as how you administer the law. But they're kicking out folks that many of them have never violated the law, and they have done everything correctly. And even when they have, I mean, a lot of them, you'd be like shocked at how non-serious some of these charges are, like unpaid parking tickets. I think we've seen that. We've
Mm-hmm.
seen, people that was driving without their driver's license, or still had their foreign driver's license, and too much time had expired, so they got a driving without a license ticket on there, and then the next thing you know, they're being deported for little things like that. Things that, if you apply these standards to the average American, it would be very sad for a lot of people who would be facing serious consequences for speeding. For, like, these are the kinds of things that they have been going after people for. For the most
And I think
part, there's 1.3 million students in the U.S. There's six, but there, so that's why this is coming up a lot. There's just a lot of people here on student visas, and 6,800 or so, I think, is the number that we're talking about. This population, that's a group that statistically, if you looked at 1.3 million Americans, how many of them have had speeding tickets? How many of them have had ran a stop sign or a red light? It's probably like half on there. So this is a
yeah,
relatively small percentage of people who've had any problems, and they're not problems that people are all
absolutely.
curious. So anyway, so what's happening on our case is we're about to try and amend the Chuck's case. If that's not successful, we will file independent of that. But we would like to consolidate the two claims, change that into a class action, and that's hopefully what's going to be happening very shortly
So
on
how
that.
many in your class?
Well, the class is going to be, the way we're going to define it is that our class representatives are going to represent that 6,800 people that we think we're talking about. There is one class action that is, I think, filed in one circuit, and it's possible that that circuit won't be covered in ours, but that's very speculative, and we'll find out what the judge wants to do in the case. And I don't think the other case, they're suing the Secretary of State like we are on there. So anyway, that will be that's going to hopefully make the news tomorrow, if everything goes along at the pace we're hoping, and we get all of this. There's just a lot of people at our law firm that are working very late tonight, have worked very late for the last several nights. And they're going as quickly as they can, along with and they've been joined today by some of the lawyers from the other firms who are lending a hand to try and do this. We also had sort of a last minute rush of people who wanted to join the case, and that has been also pushing us back a little bit. But we had originally told people our plan was to file yesterday, and then the ICE memo came out. That it came out like very early yesterday, or late on Monday. So we needed to take some time to add new claims and analysis that make sure that the amendment that we're working on is going to address that particular issue.
Well, I see a question here about the suit. So before we move on, I just want to make sure maybe we could revisit a question here. It says, can anyone join the class action suing DHS?
No, there are some criteria to be in it. For one, our case is for people that are here in the United States. So we're not people that left the United States after they had the SEVIS termination. Unfortunately, they are not eligible for our case. And also, not some people have actually had more serious violations of law, and some of those people, we've had to inform them that they are not going to be in the class, because we're trying to focus on people who if ICE actually did their due diligence and actually reviewed the cases and all that, these are people who would not have been removable and should not have had their SEVIS record terminated, nor had their ICE their visa revoked or their SEVA status terminated. So that's who can be in it. I don't know if we're taking. I mean, we traditionally, and this is like the 35th time I think, or 36th time we've sued one of these mass cases. We've usually set a deadline for when people have to sign up, mainly because of what we're experiencing right now is there's just a lot of onboarding still after people give us all their information where we have to do our review and we have to do all this kind of stuff. So um, I would say if you want to, you can go on to our website and fill and go through the steps. We're not guaranteeing at this point we will be able to take you just because the time is so short and we're waiting to see sort of like while this suit is being drafted um, and the litigation documents are being drafted, we can have another team kind of simultaneously work on onboarding and see if we can add a few more people at the end. But the deadline was yesterday, so um, I'm not. I would say just reach out on an individual basis to me. I'm not that hard to find. On there, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on any of my social channels and direct message me, and I will see what I can do.
So jumping off of that, if someone's CVIS is reactivated, but their visa is still revoked, is it worth them reaching out to you to see if they might be able to join the suit, or should they wait?
So our suit is for those people, not just that's a lot of our plaintiffs are in that situation where they had their CVIS reactivated and the visa revoked. And yes, we have those people are in the suit and they can be in it. Again, with the asterisk next to that statement that with what I just said before about I don't want to get in trouble with colleagues that are working on all this onboarding by like saying that I've got more for you in there. But the answer should be yes on there without, like I said, with those caveats. The other thing I wanted, I guess, to mention about that is if you read the ICE memo, um, it looks to me like their plans are to go back and terminate um, a lot of CVIS records now that they've issued this memo that they feel like they have a process in place to do this. So it wouldn't surprise me, and this is why when this was being just last Friday when records were being restored, and we were told that that some policy was going to be coming out. There were a lot of open questions. There were a lot of questions as well. For example, of are they going to restore your status? When you restore your record and restore your status to where you were before they did this, or are you potentially, going to have trouble when you try and change status to another non-immigrant category? Are you going to be considered to have accumulated unlawful time? I mean, there were a lot of questions that regarding even if you had your record reactivated, whether you still had all kinds of harms that were suffered. And the memo that we just got from ICE didn't do very much to basically answer any of those questions. So there's still a lot of unknowns. And that is why, people who have had their status reinstated decided to stay in the case.
Okay. So it sounds like a lot of what's been happening everywhere. They don't really know what's going on either. So no one else knows what's going on.
No, I mean, this was a huge blunder on their part, not just on the immigration front and how it was handled, all that, but the damage that has been done to the international student system in the U.S., which is really, they're like the Team USA, in basketball at the Olympics, where it's like there's always Team USA, and then there's like all the a bunch of others that are contenders, but not serious contenders on there, and that's been sort of the way I've viewed our university system, where we not every university, but certainly a lot of our universities are sort of like at the top tier where people wanted to attend. And then there were all the other countries that have been competing for years to try and take some of that, to take, to try and eat into some of that. And they have a big opportunity, a lot of these other countries right now, because of this. So that's one thing. And there are a lot of university departments around the country that are completely dependent on foreign students to basically continue on there. So there's a lot of departments that are in danger if the students aren't coming. And then there's this pipeline of international students that basically feeds into Silicon Valley and feeds into skilled, to the employment community all over the country that's looking for skilled workers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is potentially a very serious problem for them if that pipeline starts to falter. And we saw some of that happening with COVID.
Long-term consequences.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what it really created a lot of headaches for a long time when the student system was disrupted during COVID. So I am hopeful that this very over that the litigation that's happening is not just going to be successful, but perhaps showing to students around the world that this is not going, that we're not going to give up on the U.S. immigration system without a fight. And I think we're going to win. And hopefully, the damage that's being inflicted by the administration is not so long term that this is, ultimately not going to be correctable. But I think it starts with the litigation and basically ensuring that these kinds of attacks on the student immigration system are not left unanswered.
Yeah, unchecked.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's rooting for you.
Well, more news tomorrow on that. All right. So, Julia, what else do we have news-wise?
So we could jump over to the spending bill that's been in the news lately.
Yeah, what's going on with that? It's like I've been seeing some. Elisa is usually a tab who's been on some of these live streams. She's one of the lawyers at the firm. Internally, Elisa is sort of like the Walter Cronkite of in the firm. She's the one that's like always like within moments of any news breaking on anything, we know about it because Elisa's on top of it. And she's really concerned about this budget bill. So,
yes.
Like, what are some of the things in this budget bill that are like, first of all, it's a budget bill. Why are we even talking about it on an immigration show on there? Like, what's it that should bother us?
Well, so if I could, I just want to back up and sort of explain what's happening with the process right now and what it is. So a few weeks ago, the House and the Senate approved a budget framework for this bill. So what we see now is them working on the details of the bill to push it through committees and over to the Senate for a vote.
Okay.
Well, there's some variations of the, how people are referring to the bill, the reconciliation bill, the GOP bill, all of it's referring to the same thing. Reconciliation is a budget tool. Yeah. And so it's a complicated process and I don't know how to explain it, but the point is that it avoids a filibuster in the Senate and it bypasses the 60 vote threshold that's usually needed. So now they're able to pass the final version of the legislation with a 51 simple majority vote,
right?
Which isn't great to hear. But so the point about immigration that worries us here is that it increases spending, well, not only immigration fees, but spending on immigration enforcement in general. So the point underlying the bill here is that it's really pushing through the Trump agenda that they've been saying that they want to make happen all along. So some examples we have are $1,000 fee to apply for asylum plus $5.
Right now there's no fee.
No, right. Yeah, that's important. So it's an $1,000 increase in applying for
asylum. Political asylum. It's a humanitarian application, and I'm not even sure that it's legal to do that under the convention on and the human rights conventions that are international treaty obligations that basically set the whole system up for political asylum and refugee status, that they could charge a fee. But I don't think a lot of people are even like asking that question yet. Is that even legal? Although it sets it up for a lawsuit, so we'll see.
Right. So
Maybe that'll be our next case.
maybe. So on top of the $1,000 fee to apply, it's $550 every 6 months for work permits and $100 every year while the case is pending.
Right. None of that right now has any charges. These are all brand new charges that they've never charged before.
So then another example is anyone who would sponsor an unaccompanied child out of the OOR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, would need to pay $8,500, of which $5,000 years later, the child was not ordered removed.
Right. They should be paying those families, not vice versa. That's what's crazy about it. You're going to take an unaccompanied minor, basically it's like a foster child. Can you imagine, like, in the foster children's system that we have in this country, where families basically take troubled teens or troubled young children into their households. The whole system works basically with foster children, but the government provides some help to those families financially to make it so that they're not sacrificing financially by taking on these needy kids. Here, it's like this is like charging the foster family $8,500 to take a foster kid on there. That's the way I kind of look at it. That is crazy on there, and
it is. And then just fees in immigration court. We have examples of increases there. $100 for any continuance, unless an exceptional circumstance is presented. $1,050 for any waiver application. $900 for all appeals except bond. $1,500 fee for non-LPR cancellations. It's just wild. But the real kicker that really has, what really hit home for us was the bill would allocate a whopping $45 billion for ICE detention over 4 years. But still, I mean, $45 billion for ICE detention.
So they found the money for that, and they're making
random thought. But going back up to the asylum fee, we had a significant increase in filing fees last year, also for non-immigrant visas. That we submit to USCIS, and most of those now carry a $600 asylum fee, which, to my knowledge, was supposed to go towards supporting the asylum program. Correct, if I remember correctly. So now they have that money, and they'll be taking application fees.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of money coming in for that, and what I understand is that DOJ and the administration basically told the committees the amount of budget cutting that they wanted agency by agency. So security, you have to cut this much. And there was in the news, there's been talk about cuts to Social Security and cuts to Medicaid. And the Republicans have been like, no, that's not what we're doing. And it's like, well, how are you getting to these numbers? With USCIS and Department of Justice, they were given the same, task basically is you have to cut X amount of money. And so this is where they've, say they are cutting presumably a bunch of things, but they are also trying to balance their budget after the cutting of that amount of money by charging these, huge fees at various points in the immigration system. And that's kind of the background here.
Yeah, and Democrats are kind of powerless to stop this from going through, but they obviously oppose it. And the discussions we're seeing, or that I've been seeing online, though, about surrounding the bill, other than immigration, which is what we focus on, but apparently the Republicans are way more focused internally amongst them fighting over Medicaid. And even some of the Republicans are acknowledging that Medicaid is a big thing in their states. They have a lot of people in their states who depend on it, and they're not able to vote on something that's going to slash Medicaid. So it might not be their concern for immigration, but whatever helps stop the bill. And hopefully see some changes with not just Medicaid, but also these immigration fees, if we do have to, sort of regroup on what's going on.
Yeah, well, there's we talk immigration here, but it's always in the larger context. And right now we are,
I think people are starting to see the ripple effects here.
Well, there's, the president's popularity has been in free fall, pretty much since he came into office. We just hit the 100th day in office. That's, usually a big celebration for the White House about all the accomplishments they have. Um, Usually, popularity tends to like stay high or even rise during that 100 days as all these popular programs and things like that get initiated. President Trump, he started with about an 8 point plus margin, and now he's minus 7.2. So there's been about a 15% swing in popularity. And it was really interesting on some of the recent polls that have come out asking about the immigration question because, at the beginning, that was one of his most popular issues on how the president was handling immigration. And now we're seeing in the New York Times poll and the NBC poll and the other polls are all out where they're asking about immigration. He actually has a higher disapproval rating than an approval rating on the immigration issue. And a lot of it is just because of the chaos that we're seeing. But, he's underwater on every issue.
People
But
care about how he does these things.
yeah, so, we will see if it matters or not on it. But at some point, it matters to Congress as well because while Trump is not running for reelection, there's an election in a little over a year and a half from now. It's about just exactly about 18 months from now, and it could be a bloodbath in the Congress for the Republicans if the approval rates continue their decline on there. So the question is going to be when we start to see pushback on some of these policies. Today's news, some of you may have seen the stock market took a dive. It sort of came back later in the day. But we got the news that for the first quarter of the year, there was negative growth. And economists basically measure whether you're in a recession if there are 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth on there or contraction. And there's a lot of reasons to believe that things are getting, that a lot got worse in April, as tariffs started to kick in. So it's not even showing what the mood of the country really is, that number from this morning, because it's such a lagging statistic. But if we are in a recession come July, when the numbers come out again, we will see what happens with this budget. But we'll see what happens with a lot of the things that they're doing that are very unpopular, while people are in a very sour mood about the economy, which is ultimately why Trump got into office in the first place, was on that particular issue. And
I think he's trying to push it through before Memorial Day, so we'll see if they're able to do that.
Yeah, and we're going to see, we're starting to see inflation ticking up, and some of that's going to be from tariffs. But guess where else inflation comes from is labor inflation, when there are no immigrants available to do certain kinds of jobs. And that's what we're going to be seeing as well. Anyway, so that's what's going on with this reconciliation bill, and get ready for those fees. We have, what else do we have, Julia?
Executive orders. We had 3 new executive orders this past week that are relevant for our conversations here.
He's issued more executive orders than any president in history.
I know, and wasn't he in the past, slandering other presidents for their executive orders?
First 100 days on there. So if it feels like there's a new executive order coming out every 5 minutes, pretty much that's because what's happening.
Yeah. So first one I want to touch on really quickly is regarding sanctuary cities, the Protecting American Communities from Criminal Aliens. So we see the Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security within 30 days will publish a list of sanctuary jurisdictions, meaning states and local jurisdictions that are, not on board with enforcing Trump's immigration policies.
Right. People that are nice to immigrants.
Right. And so they say that they will work on identifying appropriate for those jurisdictions that aren't in compliance and don't wish to comply. They will be identifying appropriate federal funds to sanctuary jurisdictions, including grants and contracts for suspension or termination. So essentially, he's threatening to withhold funds, sort of his
Do you know that
playbook.
they did this in the first
Back
Trump
in
administration,
2017, yes.
and
Santa
and
Clara
it
County,
did not go it did not go well.
no, they did not. It was eventually held unconstitutional, the provisions regarding sanctuary cities. And I did look it up because I was so curious what Santa Clara is doing these days. They were the first ones back in 2017, I believe, to push through their suit, which was the county of Santa Clara versus Trump. And they have joined a suit, I saw just recently. Yeah, so they are back at it again.
Yeah, and they
Good for
will
them.
win again.
They will. They should.
Yeah. Okay.
Knock on
All
wood.
right. So yeah, so we have that one. That's sort of like keep an eye on it, but hopefully that lawsuit will do what it's what we expect.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the next one?
Truck drivers are required to know English. The enforcing common sense rules of the road for America's truck drivers, executive action. So this is actually already a federal law. It's not something he just made up, but it's not something that we've seen enforced heavily. And so now Trump has revamped it and is going to push it through full force, sort of like he's doing now with the address changes. You know, if you don't file your AR-11, it's now almost a deportable offense if you can't show that there's a reason to not comply. So,
okay. I mean, I would think that is
a violation. They're going to work to suspend your ability to drive. I mean,
is this like a major problem in America that has with truck drivers that don't speak English?
Not to my knowledge. And I actually saw a video online a few weeks ago. This executive order was published on the 2 days ago, but it was a few weeks ago. I actually saw a video online of a truck driver who had posted saying that he had been pulled over at a way station, I guess, maybe. I can't remember exactly. And they asked him to say they like had something to write on and they wrote a sentence or two and asked him to say it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed drivers are getting asked to do those tests too.
So this was a guy who I wouldn't think would fall to profiling, but I'm sure that's definitely going to be happening. And branching off of that, their ability to profile is another executive action, the strengthening and unleashing America's law enforcement to pursue criminals and protect innocent citizens.
Unleashing. Okay.
So this isn't actually aimed directly at immigration, but we can see how it would be used to further support law enforcement and carrying out the administration's agenda. Those who aren't in sanctuary cities and maybe just like Trump and want to do what they can to help in their positions.
Okay.
This is essentially just backing them up and even providing pro bono legal services to defend them if they find themselves in court for any wrong actions. So we're going to see a lot of profiling, I'm sure. And I also see this happening with protests. So student protests, students don't let your guard down. Yeah.
All right. So I looked at your list. There were still some other things that were like, I'm glad we started with that good news at the beginning because there's been
there's been a lot of
a lot of not good.
Quickly, we saw there was an announcement by Ayla about some arrests down in Florida about it was about 10 non-citizens who presented themselves at USCIS South Florida field offices for interviews, and they were arrested. And these were reportedly individuals who were otherwise eligible for adjustment of status.
Yeah.
So right now we are only hearing that in Florida.
I think I heard that one common factor was that they overstayed ESTA, overstayed their visa waivers before they applied.
But as you know, with marrying a U.S. citizen, it shouldn't matter as long as you have that legal entry.
Shouldn't matter. I'm just saying that's what's happening. So you're in that situation. You might want to talk to a lawyer before you go to your interview.
Yeah.
All I'm saying on that.
Definitely.
Okay. So we had that happening. We also saw, another. Cyrus Mehta had a win today on one of his. Cyrus is representing one of his students that was a permanent resident who showed he knew he was going to get arrested at his interview for over speech issues involving Middle East stuff on there, and he was. And he was released today from detention. He's not his process. I mean, his problems are not over. But that is there are a lot of lawyers that are fighting on these issues. I've said before on the podcast and not the live stream that I'm not I want you to like separate yourself from like what the speech was about. I don't even like want to get into it because it's irrelevant on there. We have a First Amendment, and that doesn't mean if a foreign student or a green card holder doesn't have still has the First Amendment rights too on there. So it really doesn't matter if you like speech. In fact, it's the most offensive speech that usually is the basis for some of the court cases that protect all of us every day. So that's the thing is when somebody's it's a I'm reminded that one of the from when I was a kid there was a Nazi march in Skokie, Illinois, and I remember that case. There was the American Nazi Party was going to be marching through a neighborhood full of Holocaust survivors. It was pretty despicable what they were shouting and all that. But I remember the lawyer from the I think he was from the ACLU, was a Jewish lawyer, and he was, his position was, this is, you don't have to like the speech, but protecting it protects all of us. And so that's why it was important that a Jewish lawyer defend on First Amendment rights these Nazis on there. And I feel like it's the same thing with, it doesn't matter whether you like their speech or not on there. And I've had, people who've said, oh, they had it coming blah, 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 on there. No, they didn't on there. It's essentially it's speech. And just because you dislike it doesn't mean that it's not protected. And that's what I remind people. If you want immigrants to really pick up the values of America, you should remind, this is a good constitutional lesson on there, and they should be able to speak out, and they shouldn't have to censor their social media. And they should, it shouldn't matter on there what their political opinions are. They should have the right to it. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that.
Absolutely.
All right. You don't have to agree with me, but that's what I have to say about that. All right. We can take some more questions, or we can. I don't know if there's any other news that we want to report, or we can call it an early evening.
We could go either way. There is a question on here, and I'm actually kind of curious because I'm not familiar with it, but maybe you are. Okay. It's not anything we have on our agenda, but
which
question: if the HR 875 becomes law,
no,
familiar?
I don't usually. You have to give me a little more description, Naren, as far as what 875 was about. I don't think anything is becoming a law that's immigration related, other than things that are slipping into budget bills, and that's usually about fees and about immigration enforcement. But it's so the answer on that is I don't know, because I'm not. I don't remember which bill 875 is. Nothing is imminent, though, on a standalone immigration bill. Even bills that are very popular on immigration can't seem to get traction and get moving, like bills for doctors or religious workers or others that have a very bipartisan support base can't seem to get going right now. So that could be good or bad. There are bad immigration bills that aren't going anywhere either.
Yeah. We could touch quickly on the Wisconsin judge. I'm actually curious on your thoughts on that, to be honest.
I would be very surprised if a lawyer. So I saw the charges that were filed, and I saw the FBI press release and all this stuff, and the tweets and the statements by the White House on there. What I haven't seen is anything with a lawyer's signature on it, and I don't think we're going to. And the reason for that is I think Justice Department lawyers are starting to be put in these tricky situations where they are being asked to take actions that are potentially ethical violations. And I think that would be the case here with this judge based on the facts that I know about it, which it seems to be um, the judge basically didn't do anything on that that I could tell was illegal. And if she is indicted, which would require a Department of Justice to go ahead and do that, that could be something that results in a bar complaint. If not in this case, there are other cases out there. We saw a Justice Department lawyer resign about a week and a half ago from the Maryland case involving Mr. Garcia on there because he was not because he told the truth and he was not willing to say what or take actions that he was being directed to take. And that is something that should be, I've said it on this stream before, but DOJ lawyer, you are planning on practicing for the next 30 or 40 years on there. If just following orders is not going to keep you licensed when you get a bar complaint, and including one of the things I think it's Rule 8.2 is you cannot sign off on things that you know are unconstitutional or illegal on there, or push theories that are not supported by the law. That is that's an ethics violation, and there are plenty of jurisdictions in this country that are not super friendly to this administration, or will give those kinds of complaints a very serious look on there. And so I would say, just follow the ethics rules. That's all you have to do is follow your oath and follow the ethics rules. And like I said, I have a feeling we're not going to see anything further on this particular case. I could be wrong. But I would, if I were the lawyers looking at this, I would probably be trying to make this quietly go away.
So what do you think of the Supreme Court or the Wisconsin Supreme Court suspending her temporarily?
I'm not surprised. I mean, this is Wisconsin Supreme Court, and then there's a Democratic governor in that state, and there's
it's a liberal held court. That's what they say.
It's a liberal Supreme Court, and right now, and there are other cases as well where we're seeing the state court system pushing up against the federal courts and the federal and the FBI, and I don't think this will be the last time we see that.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see people standing up to the administration. Definitely about time.
Yeah, it looks like, by the way, the questions that we've seen are all about, except for that one question, have been about the lawsuit, which we already addressed. So I think it's almost the top of the hour, and we will call it a day. I am actually not going to be here next week. I am going to be at the ALA Rome chapter conference in Croatia.
Oh, nice.
There, so expect to see some social media posts of me, hopefully seeing some nice places in Croatia.
All right, lovely. We'll look forward to your reports when you come back.
I'm looking forward to it. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks everybody for watching this week, and stay tuned for next week, and you'll see at least one new person. Julie, you could always come back if you want.
I had a good time. Maybe.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Well, bye everybody. It was nice seeing you, and like I said, watch us on social media. Watch our social media feeds to find out what's happening on our case. Bye.
Bye, everyone.